Ambassador Thexeral of the galactic hegemony clicked his mandibles in rhythmic amusement, the sound echoing through the crystalline chambers of the diplomatic wing. Before him, a three-dimensional holographic display rotated slowly, showing the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star system, a blue-green marble the natives called Earth. Fascinating little creatures, he chittered to his aide, zooming in on population centers that glowed like bioluminescent clusters. They call themselves humans and actually believe they deserve membership in our hegemony. Look at this primitive technology. Chemical propulsion rockets that barely escape their gravity well? Kinetic projectile weapons that wouldn't penetrate a civilian transport's shields? And fusion reactors so crude they're practically campfires. His aide, a serpentine vorthak named Sylphes, slithered closer to examine the data streams flowing across the display. Her heat-sensing organs detected the ambassador's rising excitement. Their application for membership was surprisingly well written for such a primitive species. Should we simply file it under rejected civilizations and move on? Thexeral's compound eyes refracted the hologram's light into rainbow patterns, a sure sign of predatory calculation among his species. Oh no, my dear Sylphdes. These mammals need a proper education about their place in the galactic hierarchy. A demonstration war, I think. Brief and decisive. Perhaps 3 days to break their military, 1 more to secure their surrender. We'll leave their infrastructure mostly intact. Laborers for the Outer Rim mining colonies are always in demand. He manipulated the display, highlighting Earth's major cities and military installations. 50 ships should be more than sufficient. The Third Fleet needs live fire exercises anyway, and these humans will provide excellent target practice. What the ambassador couldn't see, what the hegemony sensors couldn't detect, were the nearly invisible communication arrays hidden throughout the Sol system. Arrays that had been intercepting every hegemony transmission for the past 18 months. Quantum-encrypted messages that traveled instantly to receivers across human space. In the command center of humanity's most advanced warship, Captain Sarah Chen studied the latest intelligence reports with the cold focus of a predator evaluating prey. The Defiance hung in the asteroid belt's shadow, its experimental stealth systems rendering it invisible to conventional sensors. 50 ships, she murmured to Commander Hayes, her tactical officer. Either they really respect us, or they're catastrophically overconfident. Hayes, a veteran of Earth's corporate wars, allowed himself a thin smile. Given their communications traffic, I'd say it's the latter, Captain. They're treating this like a training exercise. Chen's fingers drummed against her command chair's armrest, a nervous habit she'd developed during her years hunting pirates in the outer system. They think we're prey, she said quietly, watching the tactical display update with new intelligence from their deep space reconnaissance drones. They're about to learn why Earth never produced a successful apex predator. She paused, her eyes reflecting the star field beyond the viewports. Except us. Admiral Kreshtar prided himself on precision warfare. In his distinguished career spanning 2 centuries, he had conquered 17 different civilizations across the galaxy's rim territories. His methodology was refined to an art form: demonstrate overwhelming technological superiority, broadcast surrender demands with appropriate threats, accept the inevitable capitulation, and install hegemony governors within a standard galactic week. Clean, efficient, profitable, exactly as the hegemony preferred. The humans, however, seemed determined to ignore established protocols. Admiral! His communications officer's voice carried an edge of disbelief. The human response to our surrender demands is unusual. The main tactical screen flickered to life, revealing a weathered human face belonging to Captain Sarah Chen. Her dark eyes held an unsettling mixture of amusement and predatory focus that made Kreshtar's carapace itch with unease. You brought 50 ships to fight 12. Chen's voice carried clearly across the void, her tone conversational despite the circumstances. Either you really respect our capabilities, or mathematics isn't your species' strong suit. Kreshtar's neck frills flared in irritation, a biological response his species displayed when facing unexpected defiance. Human, I am Admiral Kreshtar of the Third Fleet, speaking for the galactic hegemony. You will surrender immediately, or— I know exactly who you are, Admiral, Chen interrupted with casual dismissal. What you apparently don't understand is the nature of what you've stumbled into. You see, humans have an ancient saying, if you come at the king, you best not miss. The transmission terminated abruptly, leaving Kreshtar staring at static. Within seconds, his tactical board erupted in warning alerts as anomalous readings cascaded across every ship in his formation. The outer system had been systematically mined, not with the crude nuclear devices his intelligence reports had suggested, but with something far more sophisticated and malevolent. Each mine was a miniaturized artificial intelligence programmed with patience that bordered on the supernatural and equipped with enough analytical capability to identify the most vulnerable systems on approaching vessels. The hegemony fleet didn't explode in spectacular fashion. Such quick deaths would have been merciful. Instead, their ships began dying by degrees, succumbing to 1,000 precisely calculated failures. Life support systems on the Righteous Vengeance developed critical malfunctions. The heavy cruiser Star Destroyer lost navigation control and began drifting inexorably toward Jupiter's crushing gravitational embrace. Most unsettling of all, the flagship's weapons systems began firing randomly at empty space, forcing nearby vessels to scatter in panic. What manner of warfare is this? Kreshtar demanded of his tactical officer, watching his perfectly organized battle formation dissolve into chaos. Unknown tactical doctrine, sir, the officer replied, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. It appears they're not attempting to destroy us quickly. They seem to be playing with us. The destruction of Admiral Kreshtar's Third Fleet sent seismic shockwaves through the galactic hegemony's power structure. Emergency sessions convened in the capital's obsidian towers, while ancient protocols gathered dust for millennia were hastily activated. The humans had committed an unforgivable transgression against galactic order. They had made the mighty hegemony appear vulnerable. Supreme Chancellor Vexmoth, a being so ancient that his original species designation had been lost to historical records, convened the War Council in the deepest chambers of the capital world. His crystalline form pulsed with barely contained fury as he surveyed the surviving officers of Kreshtar's fleet. Explain to me, his voice resonated like grinding tectonic plates, how 50 ships of the line, veteran crews, proven technology, overwhelming numerical superiority, were defeated by a dozen primitive vessels. The survivors, those fortunate enough to retain functional vocal apparatus, struggled to articulate their traumatic experience. Commander Yithron, his breathing apparatus damaged and leaking atmospheric gases, wheezed his testimony. They don't fight like any species we've encountered, Chancellor. They don't engage in honorable ship-to-ship combat. They hunt. Elaborate, Vexmoth demanded, his ancient patience wearing thin. They weaponized the entire star system against us, Yithron continued, his voice growing stronger with conviction. Asteroids became kinetic projectiles. Planetary gravity wells became elaborate traps. They transformed empty space itself into their hunting ground, turning our own momentum against us. Navigator Kelthos, her mandibles clicking nervously in species-specific anxiety patterns, added her observations. Their vessels don't fight for quick victories, Chancellor. They fight to induce terror, to break our psychological resolve. Half our casualties resulted from fear-induced system failures rather than actual weapons damage. Chancellor Vexmoth absorbed this intelligence with mounting concern. Throughout his 3 millennia of existence, he had witnessed countless species fight desperately when cornered by superior forces. But the humans hadn't been cornered. They had been actively hunting. Deploy the First Armada, He commanded with grim finality. 200 ships, veterans of the Zerothian campaign who understand real warfare. If these humans wish to play apex predator, they shall learn what it means to face the galaxy's dominant civilization. However, as the First Armada prepared for departure, disturbing intelligence reports filtered in from monitoring stations across the galaxy. Human vessels, impossibly numerous for their supposed technological limitations, had been detected near major hegemony trade routes. Not attacking or interfering, simply observing. Admiral Nexvara, selected to command the First Armada, studied these reports with growing unease. According to official intelligence assessments, humanity possessed perhaps 30 combat-capable vessels total. Yet sightings were being reported from 17 different star systems simultaneously. Perhaps the reports contain exaggerations, Admiral? Her aide suggested hopefully. Nextvara's tentacles writhed in deep contemplation. Or perhaps we've been fundamentally wrong about everything. What if those 12 ships weren't their entire fleet? What if they were merely the ones they wanted us to see?
Admiral Nexvara had built her reputation on adaptive battlefield leadership. Unlike the inflexible Kreshtar, she approached the Sol system with methodical caution, reconnaissance drones deployed in overlapping patterns, sensor networks cast wide like an electronic web, and her fleet formation ready to respond to ambush tactics from any conceivable vector. She encountered no ambush. Long-range sensors detect human vessels in standard orbital positions around their homeworld, reported her tactical officer, a multi-limbed thrakkery whose species had evolved specifically for complex spatial calculations. Approximately 15 ships maintaining defensive formations around major population centers and industrial installations. 15. Nexvara's tentacles coiled with instinctive suspicion. Military intelligence had suggested significantly larger numbers based on recent sighting reports. Verify those readings. Cross-reference with all available sensor data. Confirmed, Admiral. 15 vessels, consistent with previous intelligence estimates of their total fleet capacity. Perhaps our reconnaissance reports were. The officer's analytical assessment died mid-sentence as space around the First Armada suddenly erupted into chaos. The humans hadn't staged a conventional ambush. They had orchestrated something far more sophisticated and psychologically devastating. They had allowed the hegemony fleet to enter what appeared to be empty space, but was actually a carefully prepared killing field. Weapons platforms so small and stealthed that even hegemony sensors couldn't detect them until activation filled the void like a constellation of death. But the technology wasn't the terrifying aspect of this engagement. The terrifying aspect was the coordination. Hegemony military doctrine, refined across 10 millennia of galactic conquest, emphasized overwhelming firepower delivered through superior technology. Battle fleets formed disciplined lines, exchanged devastating volleys across vast distances, and eventually achieved victory when enemy shields collapsed under sustained bombardment. It was civilized warfare, elegant in its mathematical precision. The humans fought with the primal instincts of pack hunters who had stalked mammoth across frozen tundra. They surrounded the hegemony formation completely, not merely in the traditional two-dimensional plane that most spacefaring species considered, but in full three-dimensional coverage, exploiting the solar system's complex orbital mechanics to position themselves above, below, and around their prey. Ships materialized from the north pole of the ecliptic plane while others rose from the south like prehistoric predators emerging from tall grass. Admiral, her communications officer's voice cracked with panic. They're not attempting to destroy our vessels, they're systematically separating our formation. Nexvara watched in mounting horror as her precisely coordinated battle line was methodically torn apart like a herd being scattered by wolves. The humans focused overwhelming firepower on individual ships until they were forced to break formation for emergency repairs, then immediately shifted targets. When hegemony vessels moved to assist their damaged comrades, they found themselves isolated and surrounded by enemies that seemed to anticipate every tactical decision. This isn't random aggression, she realized, speaking aloud to process the impossible coordination she was witnessing. Every maneuver is calculated. They're not fighting a conventional battle. They're executing a predetermined hunting strategy. The annihilation of the First Armada triggered unprecedented panic throughout the hegemony's outer territories. 12 member species formally petitioned for emergency protection details, their representatives crowding the capital's diplomatic quarters with desperate pleas. 3 minor civilizations attempted to establish clandestine communication channels with humanity, hoping to negotiate separate peace agreements before the situation escalated further. The hegemony's carefully cultivated image of invincibility was cracking like ancient stone. Supreme Chancellor Vexmoth sealed himself within the deepest archival vaults of the capital world, desperately searching through historical records that predated most known galactic civilizations. Somewhere in these crystalline data cores lay precedents for this crisis, guidance from species who had previously encountered apex predators and survived to document their experiences. What he discovered in those ancient files chilled his millennium-old consciousness to its core. The galaxy had indeed known apex predators before, the reality-devouring swarm of the Magellanic Clouds, the collective consciousness that had consumed Andromeda's far spiral. Entities that defied conventional understanding of warfare and civilization. Each time these threats emerged, established galactic powers had made identical assumptions. Such forces could be contained through superior numbers, negotiated with through diplomatic channels, or eliminated using conventional military doctrine. Each time, those assumptions had proven catastrophically wrong. The humans represent something entirely unprecedented, he finally admitted to his most trusted advisors during an emergency session. They aren't merely another military threat to be contained. They're a swarm intelligence that somehow maintains individual creative thinking, a theoretical impossibility that shouldn't exist. His advisors exchanged worried glances across the council chamber. General Morgax, scarred veteran of 17 campaigns, shifted uncomfortably in his specialized atmosphere suit. With utmost respect, Chancellor, perhaps you're overthinking this tactical situation. They remain bound by fundamental physical laws. A massive coordinated strike with sufficient force has failed twice now, Vexmoth interrupted with unusual sharpness. And both times they demonstrated prescient knowledge of our tactical decisions before we finalized them ourselves. The Chancellor possessed greater insight than he realized. Humanity's decisive advantage wasn't superior technology, overwhelming numbers, or exotic weapons systems. Their strength lay in something far more fundamental and terrifying. They represented the galaxy's first truly networked intelligence that had achieved perfect coordination without sacrificing individual creativity and adaptability. Every human vessel, colonial outpost, and deep space installation was interconnected through quantum entanglement communication arrays that transmitted information instantaneously across vast interstellar distances. Data flowed constantly through this network like neural impulses through a vast brain. Yet, unlike traditional hive minds that achieved unity through conformity and the suppression of individual thought, each human commander retained complete tactical independence, personal creativity, and the ability to contribute unique solutions to collective strategic challenges. Admiral Sarachin exemplified this revolutionary concept perfectly. While coordinating defensive preparations around Alpha Centauri with her immediate staff, she simultaneously managed resource allocation discussions with Kuiper Belt mining operations, analyzed intelligence reports from reconnaissance teams operating in distant star systems, and refined battle strategies with commanders she had never physically met but trusted implicitly. Supreme Chancellor Vexmoth had committed the entirety of the hegemony's strategic reserves to the Grand Fleet, 800 warships representing the accumulated military might of core worlds that had dominated the galaxy for 10 millennia. Admiral Colran, the most decorated fleet commander in recorded galactic history, led this armada with the absolute confidence of a being who had never experienced defeat across 4 centuries of continuous warfare. They emerged from hyperspace at the Sol system's edge, anticipating a desperate last stand around a heavily fortified but ultimately doomed human homeworld. Instead, they discovered something that defied all tactical comprehension: apparent emptiness. Comprehensive sensor sweeps detect no human vessels within the inner system, reported the fleet's chief intelligence officer, a crystalline Zorathi whose species had evolved from living quantum computers. No defensive installations orbiting major planetary bodies. No evidence of military preparation or population evacuation. The system appears abandoned. Admiral Colran studied the tactical hologram with 4 centuries of hard-earned paranoia. Throughout his legendary career, he had learned to distrust victories that came too easily, enemies who surrendered too quickly, and situations that appeared too straightforward. Execute full-spectrum analysis protocols. If humans are present in this system, our sensors will locate them. What they discovered challenged fundamental understanding of warfare itself. The Sol system had been methodically transformed into the galaxy's most sophisticated weapons platform. Not through massive installations that conventional sensors could detect, but through the patient, systematic weaponization of physics and celestial mechanics themselves. Every asteroid had been relocated with mathematical precision. Every fragment of orbital debris had been positioned according to complex calculations. The gravitational dynamics of the entire system had been carefully adjusted so that space itself had become humanity's ultimate weapon. Admiral, his chief navigator's voice carried undertones of species-specific terror. The astronomical readings are physically impossible. Jupiter's orbital position has been altered by 3 degrees. Mars has been moved entirely. The asteroid belt's distribution follows no natural pattern. They've been manipulating planetary mechanics. But astronomical engineering represented merely the foundation of humanity's preparations. Decades of patient work had seeded the system with self-replicating nanoscale mining robots, each programmed with instructions that bordered on the supernatural. Every metallic asteroid had been systematically converted into raw materials for weapons manufacturing. Every gas giant had been tapped for fusion fuel through nearly invisible extraction networks. The entire solar system had been transformed into a factory complex dedicated to a single purpose, eliminating any force that dared threaten humanity's survival. When the human counterattack finally commenced, it materialized from every direction simultaneously. Asteroids that had been secretly hollowed out and equipped with fusion engines became kinetic projectiles accelerating to significant fractions of light speed. Comets that had been captured from the outer system and precisely aimed became ice-based weapons that transformed energy shields into expanding clouds of superheated vapor. The system's reorganized asteroid belt began moving as a coordinated entity, individual rocks functioning like components of a three-dimensional wall of destruction. Admiral Colran had commanded fleets against energy beam arrays, kinetic missile barrages, exotic matter weapons, even psychic assault platforms. He had never faced an entire star system that had been converted into a weapon of war. The Battle of Sol endured for 18 hours and 17 minutes of sustained carnage that would forever redefine galactic warfare. When the cosmic dust finally settled and the last energy signatures faded, the hegemony's grand fleet had effectively ceased to exist as a coherent military force. Of 800 vessels representing millennia of accumulated naval power, fewer than 50 managed to limp back to friendly space through failing hyperdrives and critically damaged life support systems. Admiral Colran was not among the survivors. The aftermath cascaded through the galaxy with devastating swiftness. Word of the Grand Fleet's complete annihilation spread faster than the hegemony's desperate attempts to suppress it. Member species began declaring independence in unprecedented numbers, their representatives burning hegemony flags in planetary capitals. Critical trade routes collapsed as worlds refused to honor shipping contracts with a power that could no longer guarantee protection. The carefully orchestrated order that had dominated galactic civilization for 10,000 years crumbled within mere weeks. Supreme Chancellor Vexmoth found himself confronting something no hegemony leader had ever faced: complete strategic irrelevance. The final communication from humanity arrived not as a triumphant demand for unconditional surrender, but as a simple statement of established fact. Admiral Sarachin, now bearing the unprecedented title of First Admiral of the Terran Federation, appeared simultaneously on every major communication network throughout known space. To the former members of the galactic hegemony, she began, her battle-scarred face displaying no triumphant satisfaction, only the quiet confidence that comes with absolute victory. Humanity claims no territorial dominion over your worlds. We seek no tribute payments, demand no political submission, require no acknowledgement of superiority. She paused, allowing her words to resonate across light years of space. However, we will no longer tolerate aggressive expansion through violence. The age of conquest through military force has ended permanently. Any nation, empire, or collective that seeks territorial expansion through warfare will find themselves facing not merely humanity but every civilization we have chosen to protect. The transmission displayed comprehensive star maps, not of human territorial claims, but of humanity's defensive commitments. Hundreds of worlds, thousands of star systems, entire galactic sectors now existed under the protective umbrella of the species that had proven itself the galaxy's apex predator. "We are not your rulers," Qin continued with measured authority. "We are your immune system. And we are always watching." Humanity maintained their promise with unwavering consistency. Over the following decades, they intervened decisively in 7 major interstellar wars, prevented 12 attempted genocides with surgical precision, and stopped the rise of 3 potential successor empires before they could threaten galactic stability. Each intervention followed identical patterns: swift arrival, complete elimination of aggressive forces, protection of innocent populations, and immediate withdrawal. Most remarkably, they never established permanent occupations. Human fleets would materialize from the void, neutralize threats with overwhelming efficiency, ensure civilian safety, and then vanish back into the darkness between stars. They constructed no territorial empire, claimed no resources beyond their original systems, demanded no compensation for their protection services. The galaxy learned to address them by a new designation, the Shepherds, not because they ruled their flock, but because they protected it from predators.